Okay, so the next two logic gates we are going to talk about are the OR and the AND gate, and they are definitely two of the most common logic gates you will see. So for an OR gate to start out with, we essentially, in its simplest form, we have two inputs. Wires from those inputs connect together and then have a single output from there. So this doesn't really look like what we would expect to see for a logic gate, but functionally it acts like one. So with an OR gate, uh, if we turn on one of the inputs, we will get a active output. So it doesn't matter which input is turned on, as long as one of them is turned on, the output will be active. And importantly, if both of them are turned on, we will also get an active output. Now, as I said, this is kind of the simplest form of an OR gate. A slightly more advanced version is basically a repeater. So it's kind of two NOT gates stuck together, with our two inputs feeding into the back of the repeater right here. So in this version, the same basic idea. If we have one of the inputs turned on, at least one of the inputs, then we will get an active output. So again, it doesn't matter which one is activated, we will still get an active output. Now the thing to take note of here is, in this case, unlike the original version, where the powered state of the wire runs all the way back to the inputs themselves. In this version, the repeater is kind of acting like a sort of a wall, so our power will not flow back to the inactive input. And this can be important if we have a second circuit running out of the same input for some reason. That way, when this input is switched on, we aren't affecting the output from the other input. So to show you a quick example of this, and I know it's getting dark, my add-on that makes it stay daylight all the time hasn't been updated yet, so sorry about that. Hopefully I'll have enough torches. But for an example of what we can do with an OR gate is, say we have a door and we want a pressure plate on either side of the door to open the door itself. So in a very simple way, we can just run redstone wire out of our two inputs, so our two stone buttons, and connect them together, and then from there just branch off this same wire and plug it into the door. So now if I step on either of the buttons, we will open that door just like that. So that is again kind of the simplest form of an OR gate right here, where these two wires join up. The next gate we will talk about is the AND gate, which is this one right here. So sort of a similar idea to an OR gate in that we have two inputs. The difference between an OR and an AND gate, though, is in order for us to have an active output, both our inputs have to be active. So you can see in this case we have one active input, one inactive input, and so our final output is inactive as well. However, as soon as I turn on our second input, then we have a active output. So just to reiterate, both inputs have to be active in order to get an active output. So pretty simple concept. We can use this with a similar situation to what we had before, where we have a stone pressure plate, and if I step on this stone pressure plate by itself, it's not enough to open this door. However, I also have a button. Now, like the stone pressure plate, the button by itself will not open the door. However, when I stand on the stone pressure plate and press the button together, that will open the door. And if we go and look at the wiring here, we have one input running from our stone pressure plate. It's plugging into the side of our AND gate right here. And on the AND gate, we basically have a torch on either end of this little 3-block section, and then another torch on the front, and then one piece of redstone wire right in the top of the center block that connects our 3 torches together. Now, so the inputs just plug right into the outside torches here, and then our output branches directly off of this center torch on the face of the center block. So that runs to our door. And so what happens when we supply power to one of our inputs, that will turn out our torch, and when we supply power from the other input, we will turn out this torch. So when both of these torches get turned out, that will allow this torch to come on, which then supplies power to our door. So 1 and 2. There we go. So we open it up. Now the final thing I'll say about both OR and AND gates, and really with any logic gate, all of these have an inverse. So for an OR gate, for example, you may hear someone refer to a NOR gate, which stands for not OR. So basically what we're talking about there is when we stick an inverter on the front of a logic gate. And that will give us the inverse behavior of the logic gate. So for a NOR gate, we have a situation where if either of the inputs are turned on, we will get an inactive output. So if you remember an OR gate, if either of the inputs are turned on, we get an active output. For a NOR gate, if either of the inputs are turned on, we get an inactive output. So just the exact inverse of our original logic gate here. So the same thing for an AND gate. We have what's called a NAND gate, which for an AND gate, we get an active output when both the inputs are turned on. For a NAND gate, we get an active output when only one or neither of the inputs are turned on. So just the opposite of the AND gate. Now there are kind of two simple ways to build a NAND gate. One, we could just stick an inverter right on the front of kind of our traditional AND gate here, and that would do it. Or kind of a more compact way of doing this torch is basically inverting whatever happens to these two torches on top. So if I remove this torch, then we just get the direct output from the combination of the two torches on top, which is essentially a NAND gate. So this is kind of the version of the NAND gate that I certainly use more commonly than sticking an inverter on the front of an AND gate. So we'll be using a NAND gate specifically later in the tutorial series when we build our 4-track changing station. So definitely keep an eye out and try to remember what we've done here.